Daniel had always thought of himself as a practical man, never one to believe in superstitions. He had grown up in the city, where ghost stories were nothing but entertainment, late-night thrillers to be enjoyed with popcorn. But when his job brought him to a remote village, he quickly realized that some tales were told for a reason. The village was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. The people were kind, but there was a deep-rooted fear in their eyes after dark. Doors were locked well before sunset, and the streets emptied as if by an unspoken rule. When Daniel asked about it, the old man at the tea stall only shook his head. "If someone calls your name at night, don't answer," he said. "No matter what you hear, no matter who it sounds like, don't turn around, don't even acknowledge it." Daniel had laughed. "And what happens if I do?" The old man's eyes darkened. "Then you won't be asking questions anymore." It was the kind of warning that should have unsettled him, but Daniel dismissed it as nothing more than folklore. He had been sent here to oversee the construction of a new road, and he had no patience for village superstitions. His rented house was at the edge of the village, near a dense forest that stretched for miles. It was an old house, creaking at night with the weight of time. The nights were eerily silent, save for the occasional rustling of leaves outside his window. The first few nights passed without incident, but then, one evening, something changed. He had been working late, going over blueprints by candlelight when he heard it. A voice, soft and familiar, drifting in from the darkness outside. "Daniel." The sound was barely above a whisper, yet it sent a chill down his spine. He froze, his heart hammering. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. "Daniel," the voice called again. It was unmistakable now, the voice of his mother. He hadn't spoken to her in weeks. She was back in the city, miles away. There was no way she could be here, and yet, the voice was perfect. Every inflection, every tone. He stood up, his body tense. The candle flickered as a gust of wind seeped through the cracks in the window. He took a slow step forward, towards the door. "Daniel, please." There was a desperation in the voice now, a pleading that gnawed at his instincts. His hand hovered over the door handle before something stopped him. The old man's warning echoed in his mind. "No matter what you hear, don't answer." His throat was dry. His mind screamed at him to call out, to ask what was wrong, but his gut told him otherwise. He stepped back, his breath shallow, and sat down, gripping the arms of his chair. The voice continued to call for a few more minutes, each time growing fainter, as if whoever was speaking was slowly walking away. And then, silence. He barely slept that night. By morning, the world outside looked normal again. The sun shone, the birds chirped, and the village carried on as if nothing had happened. But when he visited the tea stall, the old man looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You heard it, didn't you?" Daniel nodded. The old man sighed. "You didn't answer, did you?" "No," a slow nod. "Good." Others weren't as lucky. That evening, curiosity got the better of him. He asked one of the villagers what happened to those who answered the voice. The man hesitated before speaking. "They leave," he said. "They walk into the forest, and they never come back." Daniel felt a chill creep over his skin. And if someone tries to stop them, the villager's expression turned grim. Then they hear their own name being called. The nights that followed were worse. The voice returned, but it was never the same. One night, it was his sister. Another night, it was his best friend from childhood. Then, one night, it was his own voice calling from the darkness. He never answered, never turned around. The road was completed in a month. On his last day in the village, he asked the old man one final question. "Who is it that calls out?" The old man stared into the distance. "No one knows," he said. "But once you hear it, it never really leaves you." Daniel left the village the next morning, eager to put it all behind him. But sometimes, in the dead of night, even miles away from that place, he still hears his name being called, and he still doesn't answer.